Way down here, Cottonwood Bayou, all the way down toward Panther Point, Panther Lake, Swan Lake area back here in that spot. You want to work all this shoreline. We've talked about it before. There's a bunch of guts that just kind of go off to back lakes that are up and down the shoreline that give you opportunity. You've got some bigger back lakes that you can get into now. We've had our tides have been super low here as of late, but that will recover now that we're pretty much on the backside of this big moon that's in place. Again, you want to make sure that you're still throwing smaller profile baits during that minor time frame, whether you're fishing the moon rise or the moon set. Just make sure you're throwing your little bit smaller bait to begin with and let the fish kind of dictate to you what you want to do. That's just a good rule of thumb to go with. If you got your own style and what you want to do, then by all means, please do so. It's just a great starting spot for you to kind of figure out what the fish are wanting, profile size, length of the body, thickness, all the above, color frame, everything kind of goes into that process. We found some fish back up in the lake back here in Panther Lake. A little bit of fish back in Swan Lake. Didn't fish it extremely hard because of the way that the tides have been. We've had to wait for that water to come back for us for it to be fairly good. We've had better success fishing the mouth and the deeper guts. That's why the guts that go up and down San Antonio Bay on this south shoreline here have been pretty productive for us. Now, the one thing that we've been throwing primarily has been the burner shads and the knock and tail lures. Both of those have been very productive for us. Particular colors in the burner shad have been the firecracker, acid rain, and mud minnow. Those three flavors right there have been very productive in that color scheme and pattern. Those are very good baits. Also, a little bit of twisted tea. Twisted tea's kind of cooled off a little bit for us now that we've gotten into the more wintertime months. Those darker flavors and a little bit more, depending on what your water is, especially. But when we've had that little translucent baits in that clear water, it's been very productive for us. And when that water stained up and dirty, when we've had the winds that have kicked in and stirred everything up, then the mud minnow and the acid rain have been very good for us. Again, the Paul Brown Originals, I've caught a few fish on those. I've had people catching on the sinkers and the floaters, the fat boys. Those have all been good. There's the custom Double D that's there. Those have all been pretty good. Just different opportunities with different baits and with the situation with you got. Some of that stuff's just kind of thrown just to see if they're going to hit it, see if they're going to work with it, see if they want it, and we've had some production with it. Not a tremendous amount, but again, the main amount of our production has come off the burner shads and the knock and tail. The knock and tail have been in the greenback and the watermelon red. Also, the other thing too that we've been throwing, especially around the big moon, we've been throwing the Little Johns in watermelon red, kitchen sink, golden red glitter. Those have all been good baits as well. Oh, also in the burner shad, forgot this one, is the white ice. White ice has been good periodically. But like I say, we've been just taking these guts that come up and down the shoreline. We're just getting on the edge of those, depending on what wind we've had. We've had predominantly a lot of north winds here lately, which is typical this time of year. Nothing unusual. But this shoreline here, as long as you can navigate it safely, because it opens up to San Antonio Bay and it gets to be a particularly really rough bay on high wind days. So just keep that in mind when you're working these all up and down the shoreline. All these little guts that go into it, and they're all weightable. You can get into them. You can work them to the back. You can work the edges of them. Just kind of let it dictate to you. Been finding a little bit of bait. There's not been a tremendous amount, but again, the indicators to you, if you don't see bait working in the area that you are fishing, see if you can find you an osprey working in an area, or if you got pelicans that are working or hovering or flying and diving into the water. Those are great indicators that let you know that there is some bait. Even though you may not see it, they do. So those are always good little keys for you when you're fishing an area that doesn't look like it's very lively as far as bait goes. You can get up here on this other side here, on the other side of the Panther Point, as you head down towards Cedar Lake. There's a couple of more little back lake areas there that have produced some fish. Trout, redfish, some flounder have been mixed up into these areas as well in those guts. So just, again, majors and minors have been the main things that we've focused in and around. We've caught most of our fish in and around those time frames. So make sure that you put those into your fishing day so you can continue to be productive. Up here in Carlos, the fingers this area through here, all the way through this back shoreline, all the way over to Cedar Dugout. This whole back shoreline here, you've got a little bitty reef there. There's been a few fish that's been hanging in and around on this corner here, and there's another little reef that you get over to this area here. There's been a few fish that's been around that, primarily trout. Nothing great. There's been, some lower slot to under slot fish that's been hanging around this, but not a tremendous amount of fish. But there are some fish to be had in this area if you're up in this area to fish this way. This back shoreline in here, all the way over to Cedar Dugout to the shell. You can get in on this, depending on what your wind's doing, where it's coming from. If you've got a good strong or semi-strong northeast, northwest wind, you get on the inside of the shell bar here, and you can wade all that, especially back toward the shell shoreline and everything. If you got you a south breeze, you can get on the inside or outside, however you like to fish that, with whatever you got, a windward or a leeward shoreline, based on what your wind's doing. But this whole area here, we've found periodic trout. There's been some decent trout that's been caught up on this thing. There's been some scattered black drum that's been caught up on here. Little bit of redfish, not much. Some more undersized redfish than anything, but there are some fish that are hanging in and around this. Water temps are kind of all over the place with the weather that we've had, so that's normal. But again, up in this area here, when you get up on the shell bar there at Cedar Dugout, that thing can get blown out on you in a hurry. So that's where, if you've got just a little bit of chartreuse on your tail, which I'm not a big fan of, but again, in certain situations, the chartreuse does work and is good for you if you got that in your box. Otherwise, throwing the knock and tail lures has been good in here. The greenbacks, good base there. Honeydew has been a good flavor as well in the knock and tail. And again, the main things we've been throwing on the down south have been the burner shads, both in the original and the burner. And there we've sprinkled in a few supermodels as well, but they've all been darker flavors up in this particular water here. Now, if you get back here around this little reef that sticks right here off of this point in Carlos, that water there has been a little bit cleaner, so that's where you can go back to more of your translucent baits, or maybe a half translucent like the acid rain or even the purple rain. Both of those would be pretty good baits. The firecracker would be really good, and of course in your little johns and the other two flavors in the watermelon, or not, excuse me, in the golden red glitter have been pretty good in this area here. Like I say, not one particular bait over the other that's produced a tremendous amount of fish, but it is producing consistent amount of fish. So, you're catching fish, but you may have to change baits ever so often, and just to see if they want something just a little bit different. Been kind of finicky, again, especially around this big moon that we've got in place. Like I say, we're on the back side of it now, and we'll be trending, the next 2 or 3 days, it'll still be pretty good around that moon set and that moonrise minor. So that's something that, time frame wise, if you're able to target either one of those time frames, that's what you'll want to do. Now, as that pushes later into the day, as that happens, and of course you'll have your majors either later in the afternoon or really early in the morning. So those will be kind of out of play, especially the nighttime one. But your daytime one, you'll have at least 2 good bite frames that you potentially could fish if you have that opportunity to do so. But when you're targeting these shorelines here, just take your time with them, work them. Again, bait's been really scarce, so you have to find and locate and see if you can find a little bit of bait working in that area. Make sure you're looking for some birds that are working there. We've occasionally have come up across some redfish that's been cruising up here. Not a big bunch of them, but just 2s and 3s, singles here or there. But there are fish that are hanging up here on the shoreline. St. Charles Bay. This time of year, St. Charles is one of the better bay systems around here to really want to fish, because it sets up really good for you, especially if you've got a moderate northeast wind or an east wind, southeast breeze. You can really fish lots of different areas with it. Now, if you get into some of that really high wind stuff, 20+ mile-an-hour winds from the northwest or northeast, then yeah, it kind of blows it out and kind of messes it up. But there's still areas that you can fish and be protected. But the other thing about St. Charles Bay, you got predominantly lots of shell that's up in the front half of the bay system. But when you get toward the back, middle ways, back past Big and Little Sharp, Egg Point, once you get past that area, moving further back, you get more grass and mud, not quite as much shell. So that area back in there, lots of those areas set up really well for this time of the year. And that's why I like to fish St. Charles Bay a lot during the winter months, because you just got lots more mud in there. It's usually a little warmer typically, day in and day out on average, especially when you got their colder days, and you can find your protected shoreline to get on. We're like I say, we're getting up on Egg Point, that whole shoreline on both the south side of it and the north side of Egg. You can fish that. It gives you all kinds of options that are in there. You've got great grass that's up and down that shoreline. There has been bait that's been working up and down those shorelines. Tremendous amount of birds periodically are working in there, both your osprey and your pelican. So that's letting us know right there, right off the bat, before you getting out of the boat, that you know that you got bait working in the area. And that's the primary source right there, is make sure that you have food source before you even try to work an area if you don't have that. The main thing back in there is, like I say, the protection on that. You get all the way down to Boy Scout camp. Both of those shorelines have been very good. You've got edges that are there. You've got grass that's in there. You've got mud that's in that. All that area is up and down from Egg Point down to Boy Scout camp. If you like to fish in Cavazzo, all the way over there to the back to where the back lakes are in the back of St. Charles. You can't see it on this particular map, but if you look at maybe a map on your phone and go to the very back of it, you'll see those back lakes that dump out there. Now, the thing about fishing that area back in the very back of St. Charles where the back lakes dump out, that mud back there is pretty soft. It is manageable, but it can be difficult at times, just depending on where you're at your skill set wise, because it can, like I say, there can be some opportunities where you get into knee deep stuff and it gets kind of tough on you to walk through that. But it does give itself opportunity to find fish back in there. There'll be redfish that's back on that. There's been some nice trout caught back off in there. Depending on what we've got with our water, tides wise and color wise, is basically what we've been throwing. Again, the burner shads in the flavors that I've mentioned earlier have all been very good. The original size has been very good, especially around the big moon. I like to throw smaller baits around this big moon, so it's been good. Your soft dines, not so much the XL. If you're an XL guy, then that's fine. You can try and throw it, but I've had more consistent production with the smaller baits, especially around the full moon. Your Paul Browns, the original sinker floater, if you want to throw those as well, that's been okay. It's been kind of, if you're wanting to cherry pick and try to find you a big girl laying back in there, that'd be a great idea to throw one of those, because they're looking for something maybe just a tad bit bigger than what they've been seeing. And they want to kind of conserve a little energy, so they'll eat a little bit bigger bait sometimes. So it's never a bad idea to throw it, but if you're just looking to catch fish and have that consistency, throw the smaller baits and you'll get more consistent bites with that. Been in Cavazzo, fishing down the shorelines, fishing that whole edge from the duck blind that's up on the point all the way down toward Business 35 that's out there, or State Highway 35, all the way back down into that area on both sides, depending on what wind we have. We've had very good production on both shorelines. Again, throwing the down south and throwing the Paul Browns. Also in the knock and tail. Greenbacks primarily back in there. If you've got that little bit cleaner water, depending on the side that you're on, the heavy metal has been good too. And those two boats primarily are what I have been throwing back in there. Now I've also had the Marker 54 mullet run in the Envy color, which is a greenish. So it really mimics what the mullet size and what they look like finger size wise. So it's been a very productive bait for us as well. Haven't thrown it as much in the other areas, but down in here in the creek and stuff, or on those other points that I've mentioned, the mullet run by Marker 54 has been very good as well. So again, the moonrise and moonset have been good during this for us during the this full moon phase. Put that into your day. If you look at a salunar table before you're going to go fish and you want to just pinpoint in 3 or 4 hours around that time frame, that would be a great idea, especially during the midday. So again, look at your weather, look at what's going on with your winds. That helps you set up where you're going to fish, and you can kind of get you a game plan in place. Make sure that you always have a game plan no matter what, and make sure that you're locating your bait and load up your box with those things and go have fun fish.